The moment I told my family I was leaving, they laughed. Said I'd come crawling back in a month. I didn't say a word. I just packed my bags. What happened next? Let's just say they never saw it coming. You'll come crawling back in a month, my sister sneered, a smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth, as if her words were some divine truth. Laughter echoed around our cluttered kitchen, bouncing off the faded wallpaper and chipped dinner plates. Enjoy paying for your own life, she added, her voice laced with the same fake sweetness that always rubbed me raw. I still remember the exact second I decided to leave. It wasn't a dramatic moment, no shouting or slammed doors. Just a quiet snap inside me, like the final click of a lock turning. We were all gathered at that table. My parents, my twin sisters, and me. They were eating dinner. I was trying to talk about my dreams. My vision. The business I had been pouring myself into for 6 relentless months. They didn't see that. They saw a joke. A business? You. My father barked out between gasps of laughter. You can't even take out the trash without being reminded. My mother's voice followed, soft and rehearsed like it always was when she tried to sound supportive. Sweetheart, maybe finish college first. Get a proper job. Then came the looks between my sisters, Emily and Lisa, 2 years older than me, and convinced that made them experts on life. Lisa flipped her hair over her shoulder and muttered, "You'll be back in a month," begging. I said nothing, just stared at my hands. They had no idea how much I prepared, how many sleepless nights I'd spent learning about drop shipping, how I'd built a website from scratch, negotiated with suppliers, tested ads. None of them had ever asked. "I'm moving out next week," I said, calm but steady. The laughter vanished. My father's face turned hard. "With what money?" "My own." He slammed his hand on the table. "Under my roof, you live by my rules. No son of mine's throwing away his future on some scam off the internet." My mom reached for my arm, her voice dripping with panic. "Think this through. You've always acted on impulse. Remember when you tried to build that tree house and ended up?" I tuned her out. I'd heard it all before. Every time I dared to want something, they brought up childhood mistakes as proof I couldn't handle adult decisions. "I already signed a lease," I said quietly. Silence hit the room like a thunderclap. Then the storm broke. My father called me ungrateful. My mother cried about the sacrifices they'd made. My sisters sat there, smug satisfaction in their eyes, as if they were watching the start of a reality show they couldn't wait to see crash and burn. They were so sure I'd come crawling back, that I'd fail. That night, I packed my things, and before the sun rose, I walked out. No note, no goodbyes. What was left to say? My first taste of freedom. The apartment I moved into wasn't much. A cramped studio tucked away in a neighborhood where the rent didn't bleed you dry. The walls were scuffed, the window barely opened, and the place smelled faintly of old cigarettes. But to me, it was freedom. The previous tenant had left behind a wobbly desk and a futon that sagged in the middle, but I didn't care. For the first time in my life, everything in that tiny space belonged to me. Every creaky floorboard, every flickering light bulb. I owned it, and no one could tell me otherwise. The first week? Brutal. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I was running on caffeine and adrenaline, working 18-hour days. I tweaked my website until my eyes blurred, reached out to dozens of suppliers, tested ad campaigns, adjusted, retested, again and again. And the messages? They didn't stop. My mom's texts came like waves, some guilt-tripping, some just checking in, all of them exhausting. My dad's voicemails grew angrier by the day, his voice tight with frustration. My sisters sent snarky texts, mocking me, betting on how long I'd last. One even made a countdown graphic. Day 3 of Alex's independence experiment. I shut off my phone. They didn't deserve my time, my focus, or my energy. All of it went into my business. And slowly, it started to pay off. By the end of that first month, I made enough to cover my rent, and then some. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was mine. By the second month, my earnings doubled. And by the third, they tripled. I didn't go out and blow it. I stayed disciplined. But I allowed myself one reward. A brand new Toyota Camry. Nothing flashy, but sleek, reliable, and mine. I still remember gripping the steering wheel for the first time, the soft leather under my fingers, that new car smell washing over me like a promise kept. I had done this. Not my parents. Not some trust fund. Not some handout. Me. When the salesman snapped a photo of me next to the car, I hadn't planned on posting it. I've been keeping a low profile, avoiding unnecessary drama. But something in me, maybe pride, maybe vindication, hit share. I told myself it didn't matter who saw it. But they saw it. And that's when everything changed. Suddenly, they remembered me. The reaction was instant. My phone lit up like a Christmas tree. Calls, texts, dims. Suddenly, I was popular again. Family members who hadn't bothered to ask how I was doing for months were flooding my inbox with congratulations. Distant cousins I barely remembered were sending heart emojis and "so proud of you" messages like we'd grown up side by side. Old classmates, ones who used to laugh at my ambition, were now reacting with shock, curiosity, envy, and then came the calls from home. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, a tone she reserved for guests and people she wanted something from. "Sweetheart, we've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering our calls? Your father and I have just been talking about how proud we are of you." I almost laughed. Just a week earlier, she was accusing me of breaking her heart. "I've been busy, Mom. Work's been nonstop." Well, it's clearly paying off. A brand new car. "You really should come by this weekend. Let your father see it." My father. The same man who once called me a fool. Who told me I'd be nothing without him. Now, suddenly wanted to look at the fruit of my labor. "Maybe," I said. "I'll check my schedule." That's all I gave them. And that was enough to light a fire. Soon after, Lisa and Emily reached out. They wanted to catch up, grab lunch, just to reconnect, they said. But their messages dripped with thinly veiled desperation. Talk of student loans, credit card debt. "It's been a tough few months," one of them wrote, as if I hadn't already seen through the act. They didn't want me. They wanted what I had. But the call that truly exposed their game came from my father. "So," his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. Almost warm. "Your mother told me about the car. Well done. I always knew you had it in you." I paused, unsure if I should laugh or hang up. Did he really believe that? Had he ever believed in me? If so, why did he mock my dreams? Why was my success only valid now that it was undeniable? Before I could ask, he kept going. "Listen, there's something I wanted to discuss. An opportunity. The family could use a little help." There it was. "What kind of help?" "Well, Emily's car broke down. Nancy's got some dental work coming up. And your mother and we've been stretched thin with the mortgage." So, it wasn't about celebrating my success. It was about how they could leverage it. "I'll consider it," I said, knowing full well I wouldn't give them a cent. But I was curious. How far were they willing to go? How deep into the lie would they sink? The sweetest lie they ever swallowed. I didn't visit that weekend, or the one after that. Instead, I let their messages sit, unread, unanswered. When I did reply, it was always vague. "Soon. We'll talk. I've just been really tied up with work." And as the silence stretched, so did their desperation. Then, 3 weeks after I posted that picture with my new car, my phone buzzed with a call from someone I hadn't heard from in ages. Aunt Monica. She was the only one in my family who never sugarcoated anything. Never played along with the fake smiles and guilt tripping. "They're lying to you," she said. "No hello, no small talk." "I figured as much," I replied. "No, I don't think you get it. They're flat out lying. Your dad got a raise last month. Emily just bought a new luxury SUV. And Nancy's been shopping like a Kardashian. There's no struggle. They just see what you've built, and they want a piece of it." Her words hit harder than I expected. I had suspected. I'd even braced for it. But hearing it confirmed, that lit something in me. Not sadness. Not regret. Fire. All those years they told me I was a failure. All the times they laughed, belittled, ignored. And now that I had something real, something they couldn't deny, they were scheming behind my back? No, they weren't getting away with it. That night, I sat alone in my dim apartment, staring out at the city lights blinking through the window, and I made a decision. They wanted a piece of the dream? Fine, I'd give it to them. Then I'd take it away, just like they try to take everything from me. The setup of a lifetime. The next morning, I made the call. My mom answered on the first ring, her voice already bubbling with excitement. "Sweetheart, Did you think about what we talked about? I did. I said, keeping my tone even. I want help. There was a pause, a beat of stunned silence, as if she couldn't believe I'd actually said yes. That's wonderful, honey, she stammered. Your father will be thrilled. Thrilled. As if any of this had ever been about him. I've been thinking, I continued. It's been years since we've all done something together. Maybe it's time for a real family trip. My treat. I could practically hear her pupils turn into dollar signs. A trip, she repeated. Where? Hawaii, I said. Maui. First class. I'll take care of everything. Flights, resort activities. You, Dad, Emily, and Lisa. It's all covered. She gasped like she'd won the lottery. Oh, Alex, that sounds amazing. When? Next month. I'll handle all the details. You won't have to lift a finger. I hung up and got to work. This wouldn't be just a vacation. It would be a masterclass in payback. I booked the earliest flight available, 7 a.m. departure, which meant they'd have to drag themselves to the airport by 5 o'clock. First class seats. Window side. Champagne on arrival kind of seats. Then came the accommodations. Maui's most elite resort. The kind of place with infinity pools that touch the horizon and a room rate that would make a CEO sweat. Each suite, $5,000 a night. I didn't stop there. I lined up spa treatments with ocean views, private dining cruises at sunset, a helicopter ride over lava fields. Every last experience was curated for luxury. I even hired a chauffeur service to pick them up at dawn on the day of their flight. And for the final flourish, I had a custom itinerary designed and professionally printed. Elegant, leather-bound, filled with glossy photos and poetic descriptions of the adventures awaiting them. Tucked inside each personalized booklet was $2,000 in spending money. Crisp, fresh $100 bills sealed in embossed envelopes. They were ecstatic. My mother called daily just to gush about how excited they were. Lisa posted a countdown on Instagram. Emily filmed a TikTok about manifesting luxury getaways. Even my dad let his guard down, offering something that sounded almost like gratitude. This really shows you've matured, he said. Proud of you, son. If only they knew. Lift off and let down. The night before their flight, I triple-checked everything. Boarding passes? Sent. Hotel reservations? Secured. Then quietly scheduled for cancellation just after takeoff. The car service confirmed their pickup time, 4:30 a.m. sharp. I even tracked the flight through the airline's app, watching in real time as their names popped up as checked in. At 6:55 a.m., I got a message from the chauffeur. They're at the terminal. All smiles. I sat back in my chair, sipped my coffee, and smiled too. At exactly 7 o'clock, the status changed. Boarding. I imagined them gliding into their plush first-class seats, reclining with smug satisfaction, already planning their selfies. Champagne in hand, probably giggling about which massage to book first, or how nice the pool would be. That's when I opened our family group chat, and I hit send. Do you remember when you laughed at me for having dreams? When you said I'd fail and left me to figure it out alone? Enjoy paying for your own vacation. Hawaiian sunsets really are breathtaking, if you can still afford to see them. Then I made a few calls. I canceled the resort, the spa, the chauffeur scheduled to pick them up in Maui, the dinner cruises, the helicopter ride, every reservation wiped clean. Then I called the airline. Payment revoked. Tickets canceled midair. Every luxury they were counting on was erased before they even reached cruising altitude. And then I turned off my phone. I leaned back in my chair, took a deep breath, and dove back into work. For the first time in weeks, I felt light, free, grounded in paradise. When I turned my phone back on that evening, it exploded. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails stacked one after another. A flood of text messages, each more unhinged than the last. Lisa, what is wrong with you? Emily, this isn't funny. We're stranded. In Maui. Dad, you think this is some kind of joke? Your mother's in tears. Fix this. Now, apparently. The truth hit them just as the plane touched down. No hotel confirmation. No car waiting at the curb. No bookings for anything. Just the tropical heat of Hawaii and a canceled credit card. By the time they realized what had happened, it was too late. The resort wouldn't check them in without valid payment. The car rental company refused to accept their canceled booking. The luxury vacation they thought was waiting? Gone. My father had to max out his personal credit cards just to cover a budget motel. My sisters were stuck in the lobby arguing with hotel staff while tourists walked past them in sun hats and sandals. And me? I sent one last message to the family group chat. Now we're even. Then I blocked them. Every single one. Their rage couldn't reach me anymore. But it didn't stop them from trying. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly felt entitled to weigh in. Calls from family friends, acquaintances, even my mom's hairstylist somehow found my number. One after the other, they lectured me on family values, told me I'd gone too far, and whined about how humiliated my parents felt. Funny. Not one of them had called me 3 years ago when I left home with nothing but a duffel bag and a dream. Silence at last. Aunt Monica was the only one who didn't criticize me. Instead, she sent a single message. Long overdue clapping hands. That was it. No drama. Just quiet approval. But the rest of my family? They didn't give up easily. Over the next 2 weeks, they pulled every trick in the book. New numbers. Fake email accounts. Social media profiles that looked like random strangers. Until you notice the usernames had my father's birthday or Emily's middle name. They tried knocking on my door. I watched through the peephole as my mother pounded her fist, her mascara running in streaks down her cheeks. My father was shouting legal threats, loud enough for the whole building to hear. My sisters alternated between begging and screaming my name like I owed them something. But I never opened the door. Eventually, they stopped. The messages dried up. The knocks stopped echoing through the hallway. I changed my number, deleted old accounts, moved into a better apartment. And then, I focused. I channeled every ounce of energy into building something real, something permanent. 3 years passed like that. 3 years of peace. 3 years of growth. What began as a side hustle in a dingy studio turned into a thriving e-commerce business with a full-time staff, international sales, and enough revenue to make my past look like someone else's life. I bought a home overlooking the skyline. My car now costs more than my father's entire mortgage used to. And my business? It's not just surviving, it's thriving. I never reached out. They never got another dollar. But every now and then, Aunt Monica would call or text to update me on how things had unraveled. And oh, did they unravel. What goes around? It started with my father. 6 months after the Hawaii fiasco, Aunt Monica told me he'd lost his job. Turns out, he'd been involved in some shady accounting at work, manipulating reports, cutting corners. The company caught wind, and just like that, he was escorted out. No evidence. No recommendation letter. He's been bouncing between lower-paying roles ever since, his ego deflating with every rejection letter. My mother, after spending over a decade as a full-time homemaker, found herself thrust into the real world with no work history and too much pride. The only job she could land was as a cashier at a local department store. And my sisters? Well, their glossy lies cracked fast. Emily's car, the luxury one she bought while pretending to be broke, repossessed. She's now back living at home, trading tropical Instagram posts for job applications and side hustles she used to laugh at. Nancy had to drop out of grad school when the money dried up. Loans caught up. Creditors started calling. The safety net she'd always assumed would be there? Gone. They were all drowning. And the life raft they expected me to throw? I let it sink, not because I wanted them to suffer, but because they needed to feel the consequences. They had to understand that relationships built on manipulation have an expiration date. Still, I didn't celebrate their downfall. There was no joy in their struggle, only clarity. What they had once mocked, they now envied. What they tried to control, I had taken into my own hands. And I wasn't going back. The return they never expected. The invitation came in the mail on a rainy Tuesday. My cousin was getting married. Someone I barely spoke to, but someone I didn't have a grudge against. The twist? The entire family would be there. It would be the first time I'd see them in 3 years. I thought about tossing the invite. I almost did, but something stopped me. Not revenge, not curiosity, closure. The wedding day arrived under clear skies. I stepped out of my car in a fitted charcoal suit, the subtle pinstripes catching the sunlight. I barely recognized the man in the mirror. Calm, composed, confident. Not the angry teenager who stormed out with nothing but hope in his pocket. I walked in late, just as the bride was gliding down the aisle. I slipped into the back row, unnoticed by most. Except one. Aunt Monica spotted me from across the room and gave me a single, knowing nod. At the reception, I kept to myself. Ordered a whiskey, leaned against the bar, just observing. That's when I heard it. A sharp inhale. I turned. My mother stood across the room, frozen, her champagne flute half raised, her eyes locked on mine like she'd seen a ghost. "Ethan," she whispered, loud enough for nearby guests to turn their heads. I gave her a polite nod. "Hello, Mother." She looked older, like life had been unkind since our last encounter. Her designer dress was outdated. Her jewelry looked flashy, but clearly fake. My father appeared beside her, expression unreadable. "Son," he said, forcing a smile, extending his hand like nothing had ever happened. "You look good." I shook it briefly. "Lovely ceremony." He hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. "We weren't sure you'd actually come." I took a slow sip of my drink. I keep my promises. Soon enough, my sisters found me too. Emily wore a dress I'd seen years ago on her social media. Lisa's makeup was flawless, too flawless, like it was trying to hide something beneath. "Look at you," Emily said, her voice trying to be warm. "You're doing really well." I nodded. Things have been good. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Their eyes said it all. They come expecting the same kid who left home years ago. But I wasn't him anymore. One last ask. The evening dragged on. Toasts were made. Couples danced. Laughter floated through the air. But beneath it all, I could feel something building. They were circling, waiting. At one point, my father cornered me near the restrooms. He leaned in close, like we were old friends catching up. "You know," he said, with a rehearsed chuckle, "we were tough on you back then. But it was all love, right? Just tough love. We only wanted the best." He looked at me like he expected some sentimental nod. A handshake. A "you were right all along." Instead, I just stared. No emotion. No words. Then came my mother. She introduced me to guests like I was her pride and joy. "My son, the entrepreneur," she bragged, as if she'd spent the last 3 years cheering me on, not trying to guilt me into failure. And finally, just as I was slipping on my jacket to leave, it happened. My father approached me again, this time alone. "We should grab lunch sometime," he said casually. "Catch up properly." I nodded. "I'm busy." He tried to laugh it off. Then he shifted gears. "I hate to bring this up," he began, voice dropping, "but we're in a tough spot. The bank, well, they're being unreasonable." I already knew where this was going. "How much?" His eyes flickered with hope, like a man gambling his last chips. $130,000 would cover the shortfall, he said. "Just a temporary loan, until things get back on track." I reached into my jacket pocket and watched his eyes follow the movement, waiting for a check, maybe a thick envelope of cash. Instead, I pulled out a sleek business card. I handed it to him slowly. "A financial consultant," I said evenly. "Specializes in foreclosure and bankruptcy support. Highly recommended." His face drained. "After everything we've done for you." "That's exactly why my answer is no," I said, cutting him off, my voice calm, steady. "Because of everything you've done." I turned and walked away without looking back. Goodbye, Dad. The real victory. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I felt nothing but stillness. No thrill, no vindication, no dramatic high, just peace. I rolled the window down as I drove, letting the wind brush against my face, and somewhere between the hum of the engine and the blur of headlights, the weight I'd carried for years finally lifted. I had spent so long thinking that success would feel like revenge, that standing before them, untouchable, would be the moment I finally won. But it wasn't. The real victory wasn't in watching them squirm. It was in building something so solid, so undeniably mine, that their approval, something I once craved, had become irrelevant. I thought of the boy I used to be. 18, alone, broke, driving away from a house full of people who never believed in him. He didn't know how it would turn out. He just knew he couldn't stay. That kid deserved this moment more than anyone. He'd carried the shame of being underestimated, the pain of being dismissed, and the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, he was more than what they saw. And now, he had proven it, not just to them, but to himself. They say blood makes you family, but I've learned that's not always true. Family is support. It's belief. It's loyalty that doesn't come with strings attached. Sometimes the hardest truth to face is this. The people who are supposed to lift you up are the ones holding you down. And walking away, that's not weakness. That's survival. So no, I didn't help them. Not because I hate them, but because I love myself enough to protect my peace. And I love that younger version of me. The one who left everything behind in search of something better, enough to never let anyone take that away again. This isn't a story of revenge. It's a story of release, of finally understanding that we don't need to prove our worth to those who refuse to see it. Because the greatest success is never needing their validation in the first place. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe for more real-life family dramas. Let me know in the comments what you think about today's story. Was it fair or totally messed up? See you in the next one.